President-elect Joe Biden's team is now considering legal action against the Trump White House for refusing to accept the election results and begin the presidential transition.
Well, Brianna, this roadblock is really impeding some very important technical aspects of the transition that needs to take place. There are things like having access to $1 million of funding. There's also not having access to classified, highly classified information, having access to that or being able to discuss it. Also, just looking ahead, the transition would be unable to conduct background checks on some of these cabinet picks. So there is a lot that is currently in limbo. Transition officials have said that they are even considering legal options as a way to respond to this. As his transition right now, some of that work is in limbo.
We are already beginning the transition. We're well underway. And the ability for the administration in any way by failure to recognize this our win does not change the dynamic at all in what we're able to do. We've announced yesterday, as you know, the health group that we put together today. We're going to be moving along in a consistent manner, putting together our administration, the White House, and reviewing who we're going to pick for the cabinet positions. And nothing's going to stop that. And so I'm confident that the fact that they're not willing to acknowledge we won at this point is not of much consequence in our planning and what we're able to do between now and January 20th.
Is a central question of if they're going to be able to set up the government. And we should point out the reason it matters, again, it's not partisan. It is because the government needs to be set up. But I'm told they're also still considering legal options, and particularly for this reason. There are $6.3 million in funding that was set aside for either side, whoever won this election, any election, in transition funding. That is used for staffing. It is used to bring people up to speed on background briefings, getting this government ready. It has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. It has to do with who the next president is going to be. It exists regardless of who wins. So the Biden team now realizes that they may have to fight for that, perhaps illegally, and who knows if that will turn out. But one thing that is probably different than in most transitions, this is not a governor being elected to come to Washington to try and figure out the levers of government. This is someone who's served in government in the White House for 8 years as vice president, and in the Senate, of course, for almost 4 decades. So this is an operation that understands and knows how the government works. Without transition funding, will you be able to go through with a proper transition that's needed? Would you like access to the PDB, and will you authorize legal action, or would that be too divisive, do you believe?
We can get through without the funding. We're in a position that we feel very good about. There's nothing that slows up our efforts to put things together. Obviously, the PDB would be useful, but it's not necessary. I'm not the sitting president now. And so we don't see anything that's slowing us down, quite frankly.
Thank you.
A president who won't concede. ABC's Mary Bruce right there asking the questions.
If he is watching right now, what would you say to him?
Mr. President, look forward to speaking with you.
What options are you considering? How will you move ahead if the president continues to refuse to concede?
We're going to do exactly what we'd be doing if he had conceded and said we've won, which we have. And so there's nothing really changing.
But not ruling out legal action?
No, I don't see a need for legal action, quite frankly.
Trump getting backup from Senate Republicans.
Have you congratulated Vice President Biden yet?
No.
Why not?
Vice President Mike Pence on the Hill today, also avoiding questions.
Mr. Vice President, is it time to concede? Is there really any evidence of fraud?
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo did answer questions.
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration.
Today on Twitter, still insisting we will win. He's filed a host of long-shot legal challenges, but has yet to provide a shred of evidence of any widespread fraud. But he is getting help from his Attorney General Bill Barr, who authorized the Justice Department to pursue substantial allegations of voting and vote tabulation irregularities.
There is no evidence of any of the assertions made by the President or Secretary of State Pompeo. Secretary of State Pompeo.
Let's get right to Martha Raddatz tonight. And if this is unsettling for folks at home, what do your sources tell you tonight? Is there any concern that this could put national security at risk?
You know, David, no one has seen anything like this. There is concern about what this means. Is the president planning a military operation or the use of federal troops? The abrupt firing yesterday of Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, he was replaced within an hour by Chris Miller, a former special operations soldier who had been director of the Counterterrorism Center, but only for a couple of months, David.
Let's get right to Mary tonight. And Mary, since President Trump appears unwilling to concede right now, so much of what's supposed to be happening isn't. For one, President-elect Biden is not getting intelligence briefings that incoming presidents normally receive.
And David, Biden says those briefings would be useful, but that they're not necessary at this time. He says he doesn't see anything slowing down their transition.
Presumably at some point you will need access to more classified information, secure facilities and the like. What options are you considering? How will you move ahead if the president continues to refuse to concede?
Well, look, access to classified information is useful, but I'm not in a position to make any decisions on those issues anyway. There's one, as I said, one president at a time, and he will be president until January 20th. It would be nice to have it, but it's not critical. And we're just going to proceed the way we have. We're going to do exactly what we'd be doing if he had conceded and said we've won, which we have, and so there's nothing really changing.
Until the Electoral College votes, anyone who's running for office can exhaust concerns about counting in any court of appropriate jurisdiction. That's not unusual. It should not be alarming. At some point here, we'll find out, finally, who was certified in each of these states, and the Electoral College will determine the winner, and that person will be sworn in on January 20th. No reason for alarm. I don't think anything that's occurred so far interrupts an ordinary process of moving through the various steps that I indicated and allowing, if there is a new administration, it to work through the transition. All of these steps will be taken at the appropriate time. All of these steps will be taken at the appropriate time. Now, I'm going to go over and open the Senate. We have another stakeout after lunch, and I'll be happy to take your questions then.
Important breaking news. The Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell there speaking after a Republican meeting. I want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. Very significant what you just heard from the top Republican in the United States Senate. He is trying to say, don't worry, be calm, don't get worked up. There is nothing unusual, those are the leader's words, about President Trump refusing to acknowledge this, the results of the American election that was held 1 week ago. The leader, rightly so, says any candidate has the right to file charges, allegations of improprieties, fraud, of abuse in the election process. He is right about that. 1 week after America voted, Team Trump says there were all sorts of irregularities, but has presented no evidence. The leader also saying, let the president challenge the results, and up until the Electoral College votes, that's in January, when the electors come to Washington, send their votes to Washington to pick a new president. Mitch McConnell seems to be opening a long ramp here for the president.
Yeah, he's trying to say that there are opportunities for the president to challenge the election, and depending on how this turns out, ultimately, no matter what the president decides to mount here, that come January 20th, if Joe Biden is the president, he will be sworn in at that time. He's trying to downplay the concerns that have been raised about this process, and also suggest that the transition will happen in an orderly manner, even as the Biden team has raised serious concerns about the refusal by the Trump White House to green light efforts to allow that transition to happen. Mitch McConnell does not seem to share those concerns. And I can tell you, in talking to other Republicans as well, they are not at all concerned about what the Biden team is saying, that there could be serious concerns to national security and other matters, filling critical posts if the requisite paperwork is not signed off, if the Trump White House does not allow the nuts and bolts of the transition to take place. Republicans are not joining those concerns, thinking that things will just simply turn out. But the fact of the matter is, John, no one really knows what the president will do. They know the president is upset. None of them have talked to the president. They know they need the president's support when it comes to those Georgia Senate races, but they don't know what he will do if those court decisions don't turn out the way he wants. Will he simply step aside? Will he allow the transition to happen at all? The Republicans hope that he will see the writing on the wall if these things don't turn out the way he expects, but they simply don't know. They just expect things will go orderly, John.
Mr. President-elect, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has suggested today that he may not recognize the outcome of this election until the Electoral College meets next month. Have you spoken to your longtime friend in the Senate, Mr. McConnell? And what do you make of his specific comments over the last 24 hours?
I haven't had a chance to speak to Mitch. My expectation is that I will do that in not too distant future. But there's only one president at a time. He's president. We're going to have the Electoral College will be making their judgment in December. It'll be announced in early January. But in the meantime, I hope to get a chance to speak to Mitch.
Congratulations to you and to all of our members of our leadership team. This is a terrific leadership team and a wonderful conference, very diverse conference, and we got some great new members who are excited to get to work, to take on the challenges that face the American people. It's I think the election made it very clear that people across this country reject the agenda that was put forward by the Democrats. If you look at
Listening to the new Senate Republican leadership team, most of them existing members of that team, Mitch McConnell, the majority